Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new edition of the EUPRERA Talks. My name is Wim Elvering. I'm from the Hanse University in Groningen, the Netherlands, and I'm also board member of EUPRERA. For those of you joining us for the first time, let me introduce us. EUPRERA is the European Public Relations Education and Research Association, currently with more than 550 members in over 50 countries. Our members are academics and professionals, primarily from Europe, but our membership expands even beyond the continent. EUPRERA's focus is on fostering a community passionate about research and education in public relations and strategic communication. We do that primarily through our thematic networks and projects, as well as during our annual congress and related activities. This year, in 2025, the congress will take place in Lund, Sweden, from September 24 to 27. You will find more information on the EUPRERA website and on social media. Today, we have the European Communication Monitor as central theme with the esteemed colleagues Ralf Densch, Ansgar Zervas, and Alexander Buhmann. So it's my pleasure to give the floor to the moderator of today's EUPRERA Talks, Caro Siegel, and they will tell you more about the topics and, of course, the speakers. Thank you for joining us, and don't forget to check out some of our other episodes of this webinar series on the EUPRERA's YouTube channel. Caro, the mic is yours.
Thanks, Wim. So first of all, I'd like to warmly welcome everyone from our speakers to the interested audiences. So as the project manager of the European Communication Monitor, I have the pleasure to moderate this webinar. So the European Communication Monitor is the longest running empirical study in the field of corporate communications and an EUPRERA signature project run by researchers in 6 different countries. And today we are here to give you first-hand insights into the results and learnings from the latest edition of the ECM. So our speakers will report on the new methods approach of the ECM 2024-25 and of course dive into the results of this year's key topics and also discuss implications for practice as well as future research with you together. So now I'm more than happy to introduce the 3 speakers of this webinar, which are all part of the ECM research team. So first of all, we have Professor Alexander Buhmann from BI Norwegian Business School in Norway. Hello. We moreover welcome Professor Ralf Densch from Leeds Beckett University in UK. And last but not least, we have Professor Ansgar Zervas from Leipzig University in Germany. So hi and welcome everyone. So before diving into the topics of this year's ECM, Ralf, my first question goes to you. Can you please elaborate a bit on the study in general? How is the study designed and what is special about it?
I can, Caro, so thank you. Our approach for this study is grounded in extensive, in-depth conversations with chief communication officers from Europe's top 300 companies. And this has allowed us to gain qualitative insights while also using a short pre-survey to gather supportive quantitative data. And our study examines how management practices impact corporate communications at 3 levels: the macro, the meso, and the micro. And this layered approach lets us see the kind of ripple effects from global strategic levels right down to individual practices within organizations. And as you've said, Caro, this is a long-running study, and this is the first global study that applies such high levels of strategic scientific rigor to understanding how communication leaders shape the future under complex, often competing demands. And it builds, as you've suggested, on the 18 years we've conducted the study in a quantitative way, and this is the first year we've looked at it in a more qualitative approach. The study started in 2007, just to give us a full history.
Thank you very much for these insights. So now talking more about the contents of this year's study. Alex, could you please tell me what overall topic did you focus on this year? What was explored?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Caro. So the ECM is new in several regards, not just like Ralph just said with regard to the qualitative approach and looking at high-level CCOs, but also in the fact that we don't no longer just look at individual trends or topics, but we give those topics a particular perspective or a concept, an overarching concept that we use to analyze these topics. And this year, this overarching concept is the concept of tensions in management decision-making, meaning that managers find themselves often or increasingly in situations where they have to make decisions between equally important conflicting goals. A very common tension, for instance, is that between innovation and change on the one hand, and on the other hand, the need to consolidate and make existing processes more efficient and economically viable. So such tensions are relevant not just for CCOs, they're relevant for any high-level manager in any function. And what is specifically interesting from a research perspective is, first of all, understanding what these tensions are. So characterizing them and finding out what makes them particular, and then understanding not just how managers frame and understand these tensions themselves, but also in turn how they respond to them and how they try to manage and address them head on. So this is what we try to do here with regard to three main themes: geopolitical crisis, artificial intelligence, and managerial learning. So for each of these topics, we try to understand what emerging tensions are, how are they characterized and framed by CCOs, and how do they respond to them. And across these tensions, we also bring in these different levels where geopolitical crisis is as a topic analyzed at the macro level. At the meso or department level, we look at AI and its implications. And at the individual micro level of the CCO, we look at how this person, this top leader, learns and develops as a leader.
Thanks, Alex. So Ansgar, my next question leads to several big names in the field. How did the sample of this year's report look like? And furthermore, who else is part of the ECM research team and who supports the project?
Yes, quite briefly, to run a qualitative study on that level is obviously complex. So as you see here from the results and from the list of interviewees, and it will be available in the full report, which is available for download, we managed really to speak personally to those people who are in charge of corporate communications at a percentage of the top 300 companies in Europe based on their revenues. And obviously, these are very experienced communication leaders, as you see on the slides. And these are big companies, and interestingly, they are spread all over Europe, but mainly, obviously, in the large economic powerhouses of Europe. And the interesting point is that the results, as we will see later, often differ from the perspective of large-scale quantitative studies, where the sample is not so clear and where obviously more consultants or also professionals at lower levels who have obviously experiences and perceptions, but they're not on the same level to really have the same resources and influence the direction where corporate communication goes into practice. So this is really the difference, and the basis is that we build up a large database of these persons. Many of these names are not, let's say, openly available on the web, and we were able to build networks and connect to them based on our partners. And the partners who helped us to do that are strong partners in different regions who have connections and who are representing those chief communication officers, like the large association of chief communication officers in France. They have really were never open to academic research, so thanks to our colleague Aurélie Laborde in France, who's part of the research team, we were able to open up the door here for academic research. And we have partners like in Italy, a long-term partner, Stefania Roventi, who's also part of the team, opened these connections. Alex in the Nordics. We have a strong connection in Spain with Ángeles Moreno, who's not here today. And this is really, let's say, what is behind such a qualitative approach, how to make that happen. And we have obviously EUPRERA as the organizer, and we are thankful to the communication agency in Germany, Fink & Fuchs, who helped us to give us support to design the report and the website. So that's just a short look behind the scenes, how to make such a project, a research project on that level happen, based on a lot of partners and helpful hands, both from practice and obviously from academia.
Well, thank you. So now that we have talked about the overall setting of this year's ECM study, the next step is to take a closer look at the 3 key topics of the latest edition, and of course to gain insights into the results. You as the audience can of course always send your questions and comments into the chat, and we will come to them at the end of each key topic presentation. So the first key topic focuses on managing communications in times of geopolitical crises and risks. Ralph, please explain to us what is the topic all about and give us insights into the results.
Thank you, Caro. As Alex has said, this is the macro level topic that we're looking at. And just to kind of give context, as all of us will know, we live in increasingly fragmented and polarized world that is evidenced over the last weeks and months, particularly on the political sphere, and which has certainly demonstrated that sort of complexity that we face. And there are ongoing geopolitical crises all of the time, and they have a considerable impact on the day-to-day working lives of organizations, and particularly on the corporate communications executives. So companies are increasingly compelled to try to reconcile what is effectively their business expectations, strategies, rationalities, with the growing demands of stakeholders, both internally and externally. And sometimes that's to take a stand on behalf of the organization, or to express a commitment about a particular issue. And this can result in significant tensions, as Alex has introduced, and corporations are employing various strategies to navigate these challenges, and that's what I'm going to focus on now. So geopolitical risks are defined as threats or an escalation of adverse events which could be related to war, terrorism, and any other conflicts between countries and nation states, and possibly any other political actors. And these can affect economic activity, political decision making, and social dynamics. And sadly, we have increasing numbers of these. And of course, the challenges for organization is that they are often criticized if they don't speak out about something, or if they do take a stance and it's controversial, the same can happen, whether it's Ukraine or the Middle East. And this can be just as impactful if they are neutral or non-committal. So this all revolves around the fact that we, as stakeholders, are increasingly globally informed and have expectations of the organizations that we work with or for. And this can create effectively dissonance and challenges. As evidenced in comments from one of our respondents, that these issues are coming at measurably, as they described it, a higher pace. And there are also no signs that this situation is going to resolve, change, or improve in the near future. It's the state we're in. So organizations traditionally have practices in place to deal with crisis management, and we have crisis communication strategies, but they're not necessarily sufficient to handle many of these new demands that we're seeing. And one respondent described the successful corporate response to this new world as a kind of adaptive Darwinism in how organizations need to respond to these new situations. So if we move on to the next slide. So let's look at some of the responses from our CCOs who we interviewed, and we can see here the top priorities for them. Firstly, actively positioning for the company and its top leaders with regard to significant geopolitical crises and topics is one of the major challenges, as well as responding to stakeholders and the media who ask about some of these disputed geopolitical issues. Next, the related one is with a similar response rate is being able to anticipate and foresee the reputational risks and opportunities of geopolitical developments. Then we can see that we look at how they then often manage these controversial debates inside the organization. And finally, recognizing the importance of respecting the different perspectives when we communicate externally with our stakeholder groups. So let's move on to talk in a bit more detail about the tensions that are experienced by the CCOs when dealing with geopolitical crises for the organization. And what we found in our conversations is that for global companies in our sample, geopolitical issues often drift into and infiltrate the internal discussions that take place. As one CCO commented, you face conflicts that the company cannot do anything about, and you import these conflicts into your population, and that's not necessarily beneficial for the company. And another is that the employees' expectations for companies to take a stance or take a position has considerably accelerated or increased in recent years. So inevitably for the organization, and depending on the issue in question, this is significantly adding to the tensions the organizations face. And balancing these internal demands puts more pressure on the organization than those that are coming from external stakeholders. So on the second point, social media and social engagement adds to the intensity of the challenges that we face on these geopolitical issues. And this can mean that stakeholders expect companies to engage and have a position well beyond their normal business-related issues. In other words, the organizational leaders are expected to express views on what is essentially a quite contested or social or political topic. And some respondents made the point that they struggled with the idea that they as a CCO or their own CEO is being put in a compromising position of being in an unelected position, as they put it, and yet having to take a stance which could be perceived as undemocratic and a tension for them to face. The fourth tension here is maintaining a global strategy, but also responding to local demands and expectations. So the challenge here is of delivering a message that satisfies everyone, and this is almost impossible for some organizations, particularly those that we spoke with that had multi and transnational locations. And this is neatly summarized by the quotation you've got below about how to be sensitive to the organizational context, but be consistent with how we think about the business and how it should be operated. So the next slide, we're going to talk about how we make judgments on what is a risk and how to manage those decisions. Overall, in our interviews, tensions emerging from increased geopolitical risks are perceived neither as a positive or a negative. However, as I've just discussed, the role of organizations as political actors is mainly perceived as a threat. So let's discuss some of the solutions that we identified from our top company sample. Firstly, is the importance of investment in methods of listening and predictive monitoring, which of course links to discussions. Sorry for the disturbance there. Which of course links to discussions that we've had about the links to issues management. And this brings us back to the importance of public affairs and corporate communications teams working hand in hand. The other key thing that we look at when taking a position, how you build. Am I still on here? I'm sorry. I apologize for the disturbance. But the other key thing is when taking positions, how to build a narrative and explain some of the paradoxes and ambiguities when and if you take a position for the organization. And depending on the organizational structure, this can be, for example, having spokespeople in different regions, recognizing how local dynamics and influencing the organization are influencing the organization. And experience is key in these local representations and how you're able to appreciate both regional context, but also are open-minded and hold strong diplomatic skills. Finally, in these situations of unpredictability and the increased urgency around issues that are coming to us in, as we've seen, these waves of uncertainty, we need structures and frameworks. In other words, governance structures to help us process data and guide us in our daily work. And some of the companies we interviewed have already introduced processes to objectify the decision making on whether to take a community stance or not on these specific issues. So it's clear the chief communication officers' positions are evolving in this transformative geopolitical context and will continue to do so. But it does require new ways of managing and executing corporate communications. So if we summarize on the 4 takeaways of how organizations that we interviewed are adapting to these crises and risk scenarios and the strategies that they're taking. The first one is anticipation. And this means setting up an infrastructure of listening and scenario planning. And this is key to dealing with geopolitical issues. And there's a combination of listening, issues management, and crisis preparation scenario planning. The second takeaway here is consolidation and strengthening and moderating internal discussions. And this is equally important to the monitoring of external stakeholders and the societal debates that we're hearing. The third point is connecting and the need to foster a network of functional leaders in the organization and communication experts, as I've mentioned already, with the requisite diplomatic skills and a keen sensitivity to cultural perspectives. As we've discussed, in diverse locations and regions, this involves adapting to different perspectives and cultures and local diversity issues within our workforce and our stakeholder groups. And the final one there, is navigation. In other words, taking responsibility and choosing what to say and what not to say in situations of ambiguity and paradox. In other words, you need a stance one way or another. Without ownership, this can be a source of conflict and tension. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Ralph. So the next topic, now that we have talked about the macro perspective, would be on the meso level. And we are talking now about artificial intelligence as a double-edged sword for communication departments. So Alex, please explain us what the topic is about and what are the key results from the ECM study.
Certainly. Thank you, Carol. So as you said, now we're moving to from a topic of corporate communications at the more organizational and societal level, more to the departmental or functional level of corporate communication, exploring the impact of the emergence of artificial intelligence in the function. So what I want to do here is basically take you through several things. First of all, just a little bit generally, a look at how do these CCOs characterize the current impact of AI in their departments. Second, I would then like to move over to exploring what are emerging tensions that we see, and how do chief communication officers frame emerging tensions. And then third, looking at what their responses are. So in response to these identified tensions, how do they react to them? What are managerial approaches to mitigate these tensions? And finally, I will drive home some of the key learnings like Ralph did with some conclusions. So artificial intelligence here very broadly understood as the ability of machines and software applications to provide or produce results for tasks that are indistinguishable from the results achieved by human actors. If we talk to CCOs about the current impact of these technologies, we get the answer that still it's early days, of course, even in these very large organizations with lots of resources to spend also on AI. The most sophisticated current area of impact of AI appears to be analytics and insights. So think about stakeholder analysis, media monitoring, sentiment analysis. So both our quantitative and qualitative data support that this is by now and by far the most established area of application. And it has the added advantage that this is an area that is both highly standardizable and repetitive in nature, which makes it prone to AI application, but also it is purely internal, which reduces risk, which is an issue which we will see emerge around a lot of the tensions to come. The second most popular use we find currently, or area of impact, is around generative AI. Think about applications like support for non-native English speakers, production of copy, but also real-time translation of content, such as in CEO speeches and so on. Further, the data shows that the most sophisticated areas of application are also those that are most secure and internal. So there seems to be some concern about the risk. So as is quoted there also on the slide, right now, we are in that stage of using it in areas that are less high priority because I just don't think it's secure. So this is significant also when we want to understand not just what are top areas of application of AI or AI-based tools, but also understand the low areas of application. So if we look at those, so at the bottom, for instance, we have all those applications around communication with stakeholders directly. And before the background of that quote that I just mentioned, that makes sense, because those are, in the words of that CCO, or would be very high priority and high stakes interactions. Moving on to the next slide, I would like to get into some of the emerging tensions now. So when we discuss AI application with CCOs, we find that most significantly there is this emerging cluster of tensions where on the one hand we have a very common story about a main upside of AI being increased short-term efficiency. That reappears a lot. But it reappears when it comes to tensions in different contexts with different downsides or different opposing goals. So there are 5 specifically that I want to get into, or 4 rather. One is the need to build motivated and committed communication teams. So the efficiency rubs off against the need to keep people committed, to keep their trust, to keep them motivated. And this relates to new AI and new technology bringing a certain level of insecurity to the team and disrupting their security and reducing confidence sometimes in the work. The second tension within this cluster is between, again, efficiency on the one hand, and on the other hand, the need to build essential human competencies in communications. So we see a concern where CCOs tell us that these new technologies sometimes make them doubtful if they can develop teams long-term in the quality they had previously. Like you see in this nice quote that is in gray, it says, you have to read, you have to write, you have to correct yourself, you have to expose your thoughts to critical remarks and so on. If you abolish that painful path towards great communication results by using AI, the question is, who still will be able to judge what is great and what isn't? So this fear of decoupling some of the skills from the actual learning experience that is required to master them. Another tension in this cluster against efficiency is then emerges around the need to manage and control the effects of corporate communication. This relates to all the intended and unintended downsides of using AI, potential risks, so that outputs can be flawed, that they can be biased, or that AI can even be intentionally misused. And the fourth and final subtension within this cluster, we find emerge between, again, efficiency on the one hand, but then the need to safeguard the high quality and the performance of outputs. A lot of CCOs still are convinced that the quality of outputs of their human team members is far superior to that of AI, and they fear that they're compromising here, and sometimes when introducing AI, compromising that quality. When we look at some other tensions, we find, for instance, that there is a tension around the credibility and trustworthiness of the department, which emerges against the need to develop implementation fast and be at the forefront. So what happens is they want to be at the forefront of the development, but at the same time, the CCO fears that the trust they have built over years in the department and its capability will suffer from it. A further tension emerges around the aim to have strong and effective AI on the one hand, and the need to ensure secure and ethical data use. So effective and strong AI usually needs a lot of data, training data that is sometimes not strictly available within the organizations, but by introducing that data to the system, it becomes ethically dubious. And the final tension I want to mention here that we thought was interesting as it emerged from the data was that tension between facilitation of new emergent AI-based roles on the one hand, and on the other hand, the need to define and consolidate a core of the communication department. This goes back to one of the main tensions I explained in the beginning when I talked about or introduced tensions, which is this tension between innovation and change and consolidation and efficiency on the other hand. So this fear that AI might be too disruptive to the degree that it pulls into question some of the routines, and at a lower level, even some of the identity that really drives the department and the people in it. Moving on to emerging responses to these tensions. So once identified how CCOs frame and understand tensions, how they explain them to us, we were interested in understanding their responses and the managerial reaction to it. And within those reactions, we find two main approaches. One is an approach with a focus on people, and the other one is an approach with a focus on technology. With the focus on people, we see, for instance, that CCOs focus on really keeping their teams involved. So understanding also the political nature of facilitating change around AI, keeping people involved in the process, identifying some of the thought leaders within the department and giving them some freedom to sandbox and test certain systems and try to motivate some of their peers directly about this technology. But we also see within this human or people-centered approach that they shift a focus on both education and motivation. So training is a big part, but also motivation as in making sure that the emotional aspects around AI use are understood and managed, that they understand what fears do team members have, what concerns, what emotional reactions they have to systems, and really dealing with them as people, as emotional beings that need to understand and work with these systems. With a focus on technology, there's two main sub-approaches. One is limiting the technology, which is mostly about making it secure for instance, keeping it locked to internal data to make it more manageable and accountable that way. And the other one is limiting applications. And this goes back, for instance, with shying away sometimes maybe from those applications in the context of direct stakeholder interaction, and limiting AI to contexts where maybe it's just about creating first versions for text, for copy, for speeches, where things don't go out directly to high stakes interactions. So summing up, we're drawing 5 main conclusions here. One is about trust. Building trustworthy AI means leveraging really the full potential of AI by making sure that it stays that it is not just effective, but also ethical. The point about literacy is really about understanding the needs and build role-specific competencies among leaders and staff to ensure a continuous assessment of the tools. So it is people that use these tools and that also allow us ultimately to understand them and improve them. Experimentation means limiting the application within secure domains, so controlling the context of AI and allowing to explore new systems in more low stakes settings before introducing them into new contexts. Restrictions means making sure that AI is used with a clear understanding of what the inputs are, also legally important, of course, and then also restricting outputs and making sure that, especially where outputs are high stakes, we know what the effects of AI are. And finally, again, is this point about emotional perceptions and reactions and use of AI, that these CCOs in their departments are sure they understand what team members' effective responses to new AI systems are, how these effective responses help them to understand the interaction with these systems in a bigger picture, and how in the long time they really get a spirit of innovation going in the department, where people are able to believe and trust in the systems that they work with, and most importantly, that will change how they work in this function. Back to you, Caro.
Thank you very much, Alex. Now we have one question in the chat regarding the AI topic, which I will read out quickly. So it says, you mentioned that AI is not much used for stakeholder communications. Are there any differences between stakeholder groups? I would expect that for customer support, AI may be used. Any difference?
So we did not ask for this specifically, I believe. We see a main difference when it comes to stakeholders between internal and external, where CCOs were a lot more versed and already applying systems broadly within communication with employees. And the main differences was between those applications and those that went out to any external stakeholders.
Perfect, thank you. And another question that I will quickly read out is, I would be interested in whether you have insights on whether and how companies aim to build trust from the public in the context of using AI.
Yeah, certainly. So one response that we see is, and this goes both for internal and external communication, is they try to be very explicit about what the system does and the data they use. So it seems there's a strong recognition for the need of transparency, to the point where they also, and this is again in the more internal settings, then the more low stakes setting, try to be explicit even about the things they do not know and they are uncertain about. So especially when it comes to building trust among the team. So, and we focused here also on the function strongly, right, on the communication department. They try to encourage this open culture of failure, and also of making explicit not just what they don't know, but also the unknown unknowns. So the real uncertainties that the systems bring, and then discuss those openly.
Thank you very much. No more questions for now. So we move on to our very last topic, which focuses on the micro level, specifically on managerial learning as a success factor for communication leaders. So Ansgar, please tell us what the topic is about and what the key results are.
Yeah, thank you. So the big question is, what is managerial learning and why is it interesting for practice and for research? So managerial learning, as it is defined here on the slide, is really an ongoing topic in general management research. Because if you think about the excellence of companies or organizations, this is obviously based on innovation and on organizational learning. But how can organizations learn? They can only learn if the people inside the organization are open to apply new ideas and to really go new ways. And this is not only about everybody in the organization, but very important, obviously, the leaders, the top management, but also function leaders like chief communication officers in this case. Related to AI, we have a lot of debates in the profession, if you look at professional magazines and discourses. But our talks to the CCOs, which were just recapped by Alex, shows that the top level is really things a bit different on these topics. They have more the pro picture. They're not discussing all these details. And this means it's really up to those top leaders, in this case, the chief communication officers, whether and how they are willing and able to check new ideas to future-proof their departments. And these charts, data from the pre-survey shows us that talking about these issues, which were really new to these CCOs, nobody really had thought about that as a key topic before, as we learned, shows us that about 1/3 believes they invest enough time and effort to innovate and to learn themselves. A quarter really told us, yeah, I know I should do more here. And let's see, 45% were quite neutral, which also tells us something in a personal interview with one of the professors. And the reasons are quite obvious, and they probably differ from other function leaders. we all know that chief communication officers are still quite operational in their day-to-day work. They simply have to attend, let's say, top-level background interviews with their CEOs or coach the CEOs. And they're involved in a lot of committees because they are responsible for the reputation and everything in the organization. And so that's obviously something relevant for all leaders, but specifically for leaders in a function which is really, let's say, very much driven by external and day-to-day events. And secondly, a very interesting point here, about every second one told us, I would like to learn, but what should I learn? Because we're not talking about, let's say, juniors or mid-level people. We are talking about top leaders with whatever experience. And we will see also what they do. They claim that there's nothing where they could really learn. There are no specific programs or executive programs really aimed at those top leaders, at least over here in Europe. So if that's a starting point, then the question obviously to move on is, how do they learn at the moment? And based on previous results from learning and from managerial learning, we see that there are obviously different approaches how to learn. And in this community of the top leaders who shape the profession in our field, there's a clear focus on more practical approaches, learning on the job, peer learning. It means they told us, yes, we start some small projects to invest, for example, in AI, and then I learn how to go forward. And there are a lot of opportunities and incentives to peer learning, meaning talking to peers, to other CCOs in some circles. Those are not open. It's not about large professional conferences. There are some informal networks of these top CCOs, either in different countries or also Europe-wide. And this is where they learn and discuss from each other, and so also obviously look and talk how their colleagues in different other organizations approach AI, for example, or other stuff. This obviously means they don't really innovate because they learn from each other, but there's no real inspiration from the outside or from other disciplines if you just look at these practice-approached learning on job and peer learning. So series-based learning means you try to get some insights, for example, by attending executive education courses, or you are involved to get some feedback, reflective feedback by a coach. This is somehow done, but only if those CCOs attend or attended really top business school courses on general management and leadership. So nearly all of them have attended some short or long courses at Harvard or whatever, but as it was mentioned before, there is nothing specific on communication. So they train themselves more in general management, which obviously also their peers in HR, IT, or whatever do. And then the interesting point, and probably a disappointing point also for all the researchers who are attending today, is what's about studies, research insights, which are published by universities, academic researchers, but obviously we also have a lot of studies of whatever quality by communication agencies, consultancies. And here there was a clear message to, let's say, us also in these interviews. They all told us, yes, they are following the professional discourse. They all read the Edelman Trust Barometers and other studies, but they're skeptical because obviously those experienced people all know that the topics framed here is obviously part of, let's say, public relations activity or marketing activities of consultancies, but they all read that. And the only source which really popped up, which is really recognized on at these top level people, is really all these reports and studies from top business schools and by top management consultancies, like this quote shows. I would always read something published by McKinsey or Boston Consulting Group, for example. So this is where new ideas pop up and which then probably also drop into our discipline, because these top leaders then ask their staff, okay, what's about these new trends? Do you know about that? So it also would make sense for obviously communication professionals on all levels, and also probably for researchers to watch out about the framing of different trends in these areas. Yeah, unfortunately, as you see in this quote on the right side, academic research doesn't play a role here. People quite frankly told us, I don't have access, it's too complicated. Yeah, there might be something in our own field, but we simply don't read it, so we don't really get inspiration from these sources. Now, if this is what happens today, we're talking about the tensions, because even if you want to do it, how can you do that as a leader? And here is an interesting point, because probably, at least as researchers, we don't think so much about that if we reflect on our own situation, because our job is to reflect and to think about new stuff. But on the top leadership level, you really experience some of these tensions, because on the one hand, you have to renew and to innovate, but at the same time, you have to deliver, you have to perform. And how can you perform if you lead a team? You have to, on the one hand, keep track and use proven methods, mindsets, metrics, and cannot just come about with new ideas every day, like consultancies and probably even academics tell you should do. This is one of these quotes on the right side, the lower one. It's extremely important for us as leaders to radiate confidence in our teams and have people concentrate on their job. And if you jump in, always have something new, then you cannot do that. And this also explains, like Alex told us, whether in the profession and even in the companies, some, let's say, lower level professionals are very jumpy and talk about trying out the new whatever AI tools. And the leaders are sometimes much more reluctant, because they have to drive the whole department, and they know we have to radiate where do we go, and we shouldn't jump too early, because that might be good in the way of innovating. On the other hand, we might disturb our ongoing processes and lose trust among our internal stakeholders. And even somebody thought, but innovation is really about openness. But in fact, if you're responsible for reputation for a global brand, you have to control, and probably this is also our mindset as a top leader. So we even know that it's probably we are not the best in innovating, because our job is to take care and to steer everything. And last but not least, the last point, and also a nice quote. Yes, somebody told us, or several people told us, but this is only one quote here. We all know that we have to acquire knowledge, but in contrast to some of our other peers on the leadership level, our role is to know everything and be a 360-degree advisor for our CEOs on any topic. And if this is our role, and if we are chief communication officers because people trust us that we know everything, and our team knows all these things, it's internally quite a bit difficult to tell people we always need a lot of training, because this, on the other hand, probably challenges our own reputation. So the nice quote: it will be hard to understand why you need training if you're already paid €500,000 as a chief communication officer to know everything. Interesting quote, obviously. We're talking about the chief communication officers here, not about all communicators, but it probably tells us a bit about the way also insights from research are, talked about, if they are recognized at all in these circles of the top leaders. So what can be done very quickly? In the end, you need to save some time and to force yourself to learn. Some people do that, but only a few, but really taking away some part of the time to read or to use these peer exchange networks, which also takes a lot of time to travel to these places, and this is frequently done. And interestingly, also, they use their own positions, their own reputation, and are very selective of what to learn. This also explains why some topics which are in the profession, in academia, which might be relevant from our point of view, are simply not picked up by some individuals on this top level, because they simply say, I have to concentrate on, also in innovation, on some topics. And if something is relevant, but not on my own agenda, it doesn't fit to my own profile within my own global organization, then probably I simply don't step in. It's not my topic then. And this again makes it difficult for others in comms department to drive those topics, because if the top leader is not backing them, then obviously there's a limitation of what can you do on a specific topic, which is probably a good thing to go forward. To come to a conclusion then, what can we learn here? I think this is a quite new topic, and if you compare that with results from managerial research in other disciplines in general management, we see that the current learning practices of communication leaders are on the one hand diverse, but mostly very pragmatic. So it's certainly not on the same level what we see in other managerial fields, where top business schools, consultancies, academia really has shaped a discourse, a more reflective discourse, which really reaches these top decision makers. But this also means it's up to the communication leaders to innovate themselves and their profession. Consultants, academics cannot really do that. If those top leaders want to drive their profession, they also should support and start with themselves to really go into different ways of innovating learning. Learning at the moment is very much limited to business and leadership knowledge, to this what is offered by these top business schools. But in the end, all executives, HR people, and so on will have these competencies. So the big question is, where are the specific competencies for future-proofing corporate communications, for managing these large departments and really using these big resources to profile communications? Also for the next generation leaders, there's clearly a gap. And as I already mentioned, the reflectiveness, the quality of the discourse is not on a similar level to that in general management. And this means it is clearly criticized by the CCOs themselves. So there are ways to go forward, but in the end, the question is, who are the players who push that forward? And this also means probably looking at ourselves, what can academics, what can universities do? There is some research about that in the US. There is a gap between academia and practice, based on the topics we research, but based on the ways we present it. And we see openness among these top leaders to be more involved. But so the question is obviously other ways to bridge these gaps and help also those leaders to get more access to reliable insights and ideas if they want to use it. So these are some interesting, I think also some practical insights which are relevant not only for the communication practitioners, but also for researchers in that field.
Thank you very much, Ansgar. So we have one question in the chat, which I will read out quickly. Have the CCOs mentioned any factors that are influencing their managerial learning? Beyond the technological discussion, the leaders I spoke to mentioned that regulations, in particular EU CSRD, have been a strong driver for managerial learning. Have you seen any other factors?
Thank you, Chiara. Very good question. So apart from this topic, we asked all of the interviewees in the end whether there are specific topics they are working on at the moment. And interestingly, only topics popped up which we already knew. Like you talked about regulation, obviously that's a topic at the moment. But there's clearly a difference between the different levels. So the regulation issue, for example, is this really a top level topic? Obviously, you have to invest resources. There are some task forces about investor relations and communications, corporate communications. Like in AI, the top level is more responsible for setting the guidelines for starting projects, for investing into these fields. So we really saw that the more holistic topics, like the geopolitical issue, which or AI is really the big question of how to set up my departments in the future, about competencies, investments. This is what they are talking about. And some of the other issues probably really, they talk about that. They have some use cases, but you clearly felt that, it's not their managerial realm. It's somebody as a direct report, as a sub-function takes care. So in the end, yes, there was nothing really totally new popping up, but it's more what was expected, was already in the discourse. But the perspective on how they framed it and what was more relevant, there were clearly differences in our interviews. If you compare that to other research we do on other levels, or on quantitative research we did before in the previous design of the European Communication Monitor, where we had a broader level and of hierarchies and people who shared their opinion.
Thank you very much, Ansgar. So now we got a good first overview over the ECM 2024-25 study. If you want to dive deeper, the full report can be freely accessed on our website. It's www.communicationmonitor.eu. It's a 44-page report with many more interesting quotes and visuals. You can also download it there for free. And although this report was just published, the next edition of the ECM is already underway. So my last question goes to you, Ralph. What can we expect from the ECM 2025-26 study?
Thanks, Caro. Well, we've already, as you suggest, started to look at what we'll explore for the next year. We're going to follow the same methodology. So we're looking at the macro, the meso, and the micro levels. And in this, we'll be exploring completely different topics and looking in more depth around issues to do with values and positioning, also around talent management, and more on the micro level around coaching and mentoring. So we explore different topics further into the depth, like we've done this time around in 24-25. So yeah, that's what we'll be looking at in principle. More to follow.
Thank you. So stay tuned, everyone. And well, what's left to say is thanks to everyone for joining us today for this EUPRERA webinar, to the speakers, of course, and also to the audiences, to the interesting questions that we got. And of course, huge thanks to EUPRERA for providing us this platform to speak about this year's report. So thank you very much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you all. Thanks, Caro.
Thank you.